want to introduce one singular concept that if you remember nothing else from this video, this is the thing to start with. But before we get into all of those details, I am all too familiar with holiday drama as a child myself and watching the adults around me, as well as becoming a mom and then navigating the stream of opinions that come with bringing a child to holiday gatherings and all of the triggering things that come up from that. So I wanted to share some simple mindset shifts and practical, tangible tips that you can start implementing in your life today for drama-free holiday gatherings. Primarily, obviously, going to talk about this at family gatherings. You could also apply everything I'm talking about here if you are struggling with friendship groups or anything like that. If you guys are new here, my name is Rachel from Confidently Mom. I share embodied parenting tips, which includes reparenting, as well as baby and toddler product reviews and Montessori activities and all that good stuff. And I will include gift guides if you are shopping for your kids this season in the description box below. Okay, so this video actually ended up having 2 parts. So there's like one 3-part section and then another 3-part section because there was just so many things I wanted to share. I want to introduce one singular concept that if you remember nothing else from this video, this is the thing to start with in any given situation. And that is the concept of the pattern interrupt, meaning you are going to choose to do something different than you have done in the past. Now, this tip can be applied to wherever you're at in your life and is an evaluation tool I constantly use and apply for any area of my life that I dislike. It's a game changer. Basically, with regards to drama-free holidays, this could be some big swings altogether. And I'm talking like deciding not to go to the event at all type of big swings. So obviously that's always an option available to you if things are just getting really bad, especially if you have a baby. The first 5 years, really protecting your own energy and the family underneath your roof is always my priority number 1. The next thing would be if it's just like one specific person at the event, you go in with the intention to just completely avoid that one triggering person. And we'll talk about ways later on in this video. And then the third one would be like coming prepared with activities or games that entirely change the dynamic of the get together. For instance, maybe your family all gets together and they just like sit around on the couch. It's very tense and dense and not a fun vibe. Be the party person. Come with reindeer games or turkey games, whatever the holiday is. Set up little obstacle courses to just interrupt the typical pattern that plays out at that gathering is a game changer. Now, each of these strategies I just listed are a type of avoidance strategy. Straight up not going, avoiding one specific person or totally hijacking the environment into something else to avoid that typical humdrum conversation. And I want to say that this is just one step on the personal healing journey, not the final destination. I think the ultimate goal when it comes to having a drama-free holiday is the ability to be both peaceful and present at the gathering. I personally find that most people don't have the capacity to jump from, I feel super triggered, there's lots of drama, I feel unsafe in my body, to peaceful and present in just one simple gathering. And so I always like those initial avoidance strategies I talked about as that first step. I find those examples I gave before, they actually create a buffer around your energy field to do some of the more nuanced work, which we're going to talk about in a second. That's a little bit more subtle. It requires you doing a little bit more reparenting of yourself in the moment, a little more like internal coaching in the moment. But if you're not there yet, don't push yourself to be there yet, and use something that is going to actually create a physical buffer around you from the old way your gatherings were going. Eventually, you will have the capacity to do some more of these one-to-one strategies I'm about to talk about. But that's why I say, if you only remember one thing from this video, it's what can I do differently? Like, what's the pattern interrupt that feels like a match for me going into this holiday? The next series is going to be about creating pattern interrupts that truly create peace and presence for you during the holidays. I strongly suggest using the practices I'm about to show you throughout the year as kind of like dress rehearsals leading up to the big event. Usually if you have stuff going on with your family, you probably have stuff going on with your friends too. It's kind of just how the universe works, where it's perfectly designed for your healing and for your growth. So if you're avoiding your family, it's going to come up, whether that's at work, with your kids, or with your friends. It's going to like come back around at you somewhere. So the first thing I'm going to suggest is listening with the best case scenario in mind. Some people call this the most generous interpretation. Others call it the most favorable view or the most charitable take or the kindest interpretation. Basically, the root of it is to come up with some sort of slogan that will stick in your head that really begs the question, what is the kindest way I could interpret this situation? What's the biggest benefit of the doubt I could give? And this applies to yourself and others. And then I always like to follow that up with really sitting with, how does it feel to give someone the benefit of the doubt? How does it feel to give someone grace? Once you start focusing in on how that feels, to offer that compassion and kindness, it does start to shift your energy field, and it's a lot easier to reach for this framework in your mind going forward. So often I talk to people who feel trapped in their relationship with their parents, like it's just never going to change. I totally can relate to this. Like, I literally had just written family members off in my life, thinking like full on funerals in my head, said goodbye. Fast forward to 7 years, I'm like, oh, color me shocked. The truth is, our relationships will never change until we change. That starts with letting go of a lot of the things we think we're unhappy about. It means we stop scanning for boundary violations or things to nitpick and fight over. And it starts with really offering this generous interpretation and scanning for all these little acts of kindness that that person is doing to begin shifting our views on them as a whole. So across many cultures, I kind of touched on this before, there is this belief system that everything we experience in life is perfectly designed for our growth, our healing. It's a gift to us for our hero's journey, for our soul's evolution, kind of whatever you want to call it, to be made up into God's image. And when we begin to look at these little issues or big issues we're having with people through this lens, instead of them being grievances or pain points, but rather as gifts in our own personal hero's journey, we can completely shift our energy towards them and start to create new stories. In truly abusive relationships, it could be that you are on a journey of empowerment, and going no contact could be a great first step, but eventually you also want to be able to separate that no contact decision from having any emotional charge related to it. That's the true freedom. That's the true empowerment. But starting with just like a physical boundary is the first step. If it's more subtle or annoying stuff that's just getting you sour or in a bad mood, it could be situations that are showing you where you have some anger or abandonment or rejection that needs to be looked at and healed and forgiven. If you have a history of oversharing with people, especially unsafe people, it could be the opportunity for you to learn how to listen more, protect yourself better. Usually there's an empowerment thing there too. And even learning to value the power of small talk, which when I was deep in my own trauma and healing, I was pretty much always found in a corner talking about the deepest, darkest parts of somebody's soul. And what I was doing to some degree was probably like trauma bonding. And I used to justify it as, well, I just don't like small talk. Small talk isn't for me. Fast forward 10 years later with 2 little kids, I love small talk. I have a deep appreciation for it. And I guess I should define small talk, because for me, small talk is thinking about different ideas or concepts or hearing people's books they're reading or TV shows they're watching. It's not just like, how's the weather? I found that the more safety I felt in my body, the more easily I was able to have these surface level conversations that were based more on knowledge concepts or pop culture and not so much on somebody's hidden baggage they were carrying around, because I no longer needed to try to create that fake sense of safety outside of myself. Now, I actually really don't like hearing people's baggage that they're like in the middle of going through, which used to be like my bread and butter. If somebody wants to talk to me about that stuff, I have clear boundaries. Hire me as your counselor or your coach, because that is not what friendship is to me anymore. The next thing you're gonna wanna do for drama-free holidays is to get others talking. This could be by asking a lot of questions, or if you watched that show recently, Nobody Wants This, they do a really good example of this where you just repeat the last few words somebody said to you back to them, and it kind of just keeps them going. So most of the problems I have seen when it comes to gatherings has to do with people oversharing. So a really simple way to protect yourself from doing that is by talking less, listening more. And then if you are listening and you hear something that you don't love, it's an opportunity to use that charitable take I mentioned before and just listen with an open mind to whatever somebody's sharing with you and practice feeling safe in front of different views or opinions and seeing what comes up for you, which also is going to lead me to the third thing. I'm going to tie all these together, which is to know your exit strategies. Typically at gatherings, I would say there are 3 P's are the hot button topics: the past, personal, current, present choices in your life, and politics. And I would say it's just best to avoid these topics altogether. And knowing how to steer a conversation makes it much easier to avoid those topics. And how you know to steer a conversation is what I just mentioned: asking questions that kind of guide the direction of the conversation, or repeating those last couple words back to somebody and just letting them kind of go. If they are just kind of rambling, inevitably people will venture into those topics, at which point it's good to know your exit route. This can be a really simple verbal boundary like, I don't really want to talk about this, or oh, I'm so tired of hearing about this. Can we talk about something else? It could also be something more physical, saying, excuse me, I need to go to the bathroom or check on my kids. I'm going to go see if the host needs help with anything. Now, if any of those personal topics come up, your relationship, parenting, finances, career, all that type of stuff, I personally find if you get triggered on those personal topics, it's often because you are unhappy with where they are at in your life. I always think of like Elle Woods from Legally Blonde. Happy people don't kill their husbands. If you're happy with your choice and confident in it, you're not gonna feel the need to reach for that dinner night if somebody brings that stuff up to you. This is like a really good moment or example of where I talk about that sort of dissonance or friction that we have in relationships can actually be an incredible gift to our own personal hero's journey. And I say, if that comes up for you, go back to that first thing I mentioned about the most generous interpretation and apply it to yourself. For instance, say a family member comments on your parenting choice and you get upset about it. Once you sit with it a little while, you might realize you aren't mad at them about their statement. In fact, you actually found some truth in their statement because you only made that parenting choice after seeing it posted on Instagram and you were in kind of a desperate situation. And so that Instagram post felt like a life preserver and you latched onto it, only it's not going how you really wanted it to go. And now you have some shame and resentment happening around it and you don't really know how to get out of the situation. And instead of taking personal responsibility or accountability on that, you're now lashing out at this family member that's kind of pointing it out to you. Not talking from personal experience here or anything. On the flip side, it could be something totally different. Like maybe you actually do feel confident in your parenting choice, but that comment got you feeling pretty angry because the person who delivered to you was a traumatizer from your own childhood. And it actually brought up a lot of feelings of rejection about how you experienced them as a child. And you can't believe the lack of sensitivity or self-awareness that they don't care how they hurt you or damaged you or whatever it is. And there's like this whole victim consciousness thing playing out. And at that point, what we want to do is pause, express gratitude for the awareness now, and that this is now coming back up to be looked at, forgiven, and healed because you're no longer that child and you actually can respond to things differently. Now you have the opportunity to no longer give that person or the feelings that you're experiencing power or control over you, because you can actually see how your feelings are a beneficial communication system that are giving you like invaluable insights to do things differently. It's a pattern interrupt to like bring this full circle to that original concept I talked about. From there, you can really disarm things because you've taken some personal responsibility and apply that whole framework I've mentioned towards other people, towards yourself. On the other hand, maybe they're making comments to you about your parenting choices because they actually feel guilty about the way they parented. And so them poking at you is like a really messed up backdoor way to try to open up a conversation for forgiveness and healing, but they are not emotionally or socially mature enough to just say that. Whole cycle that plays out is incredibly common in relationships that lack boundaries, that have high levels of codependency or enmeshment. This ends up becoming an opportunity to offer empathy and put yourself in the person's shoes because they simply don't have the emotional or communication or social skills to practice reciprocity, to practice gratitude, to practice boundaries, to practice faith that others can overcome their own struggles. This is a really big concept I'm kind of dropping on you at the end. So if it's the first time you're hearing it, don't be surprised if it feels like I'm kind of talking gibberish. And it's something I'll be diving deeper into in my reparenting course that'll come out next year in 2025. So drop your email at the link in the description box below if you want to get notified for when that comes out. Until next time, let me know in the comments which of these strategies you're going to try to implement for a drama-free holiday season. Be sure to go back and check out my gift guides if you're shopping for the kids, and be sure to check out some more of my favorite parenting phrases that can totally shift the dynamic if you are looking for other pattern interest. And then until next time, my name's Rachel. Have a good one.